was only a transition to a different sphere of consciousness. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. She is a living presence in their spiritual earthbound plane.
Hello and welcome to episode 65 of the Talking to the Dead podcast. Before I do this week's podcast, I thought I would just talk a little bit about the last podcast where I went to various places in Cologne and managed to get some information, some energy, some feeling for the 4 or so people who've written to me over the last few months, and I was rude enough not to really deal with it until I'd got some other things out of the way. So obviously I'm in that situation quite often because I'm very lucky to get quite a lot of feedback from all of you who are listening, and I love it all because some I can help you with, some I can help privately and I communicate privately with you, and others is a little bit more public. As I've heard from Beth, I thought I'd read her reply to me. The other 3 I haven't heard from, which is fine. I mean, I presume it's because either I got it horribly wrong or they just haven't had time. And after all, it took me a couple of months to get around to them. So I really am not worried about that. I'd love to hear from you, though, if you do have anything to tell me. But I'll read you the email that I got back from Beth. This was on the 14th of April, so probably a few days after I posted the last episode. And if you don't remember, please listen to the previous podcast, and you can actually hear me and the things that I had to say. She wrote, Philip, wow, we loved the podcast. And thank you. And it was very kind that you included it for me. What you said regarding Eddie, now I don't think I mentioned her name, did resonate with me. First you mentioned military, and he was in the military, and in the earlier part of his life where he worked as a medic, so you were also right about that part also. It was so cool that he worked on you and your shoulder, and you felt better after as well. About the massage, he did give sports massages at one point. And I was in a lot of pain, and it really helped me. When the church bells went off, that was a good timing because you made a comment in question form, and you got it right. And he would go ding, 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 and that's right, when bells went off. Also, you mentioned Arlington National Cemetery. Did I mention my dad was just laid to rest there? No, you didn't. And I was saying to Sonia, I hope my dad comes through. I like the message you received that Eddie is still healing and he's not done. Healing will go on, and I think he is helping me along in creating my podcast, as it is not easy for me, and several times I almost gave up. You mentioned the name Derek, which was actually Daryl. Okay, that is his roommate that passed. He was probably saying he was with her. And also, Sonia started smelling cedar right after the podcast that she felt like was connected to you. Does that mean anything to you? Actually, you know what? I thought about that for a while, but now just suddenly reading that out, what it does remind me, of course, is the smell of being in that, in those various cremations and whatever you call them, crematoriums and graveyards, because there is always that sort of sense of that smell of cedar. I think when they cremate people, they put a certain incense in, and it certainly smells like cedar. And most of these beautiful cemeteries tend to be built in cedar forests. So yes, I suppose it is related to that, maybe. Anyway, she says, thanks again. Love that you remembered all the details about biking and how I love nature when you were talking outside, as I feel I am right there with the birds, and love the colourful descriptions of the surroundings. Well, that was, really nice. And yes, on a very basic scale, obviously there was some connection there, and it was really nice that she felt the connection herself, which I suppose is the whole point. And I'd be really interested to know if the other ladies who I felt things for did feel anything at all, even if they didn't feel anything at all, having had some time to think about it afterwards, has anything come through? Who knows? So that's that. And very next point is that in the last, I suppose, 2 or 3 months, I've been thinking an awful lot about nature. And I have touched on nature spirits before. My friend in Spain mentioned to me, when I talk about nature spirits, don't forget to think of Frozen 2, which is a film my girls love. And it's full of nature spirits. But I don't know much about nature spirits, and I wanted to do an episode on nature spirits. So what I'm going to do today, because it's lovely, lovely weather, believe it or not, it's the day of the Pope's funeral, and I've been watching it on television. And I had an amazing feeling watching that. I'm not a Catholic, but wow, I mean, to see hundreds of thousands of people standing there in mourning and celebration of the life of Pope Francis, you could just feel the energy through the television screen. I can't imagine what it must be like to be there, to feel all that love and all that spiritual feeling. And that's what it's all about. I mean, that incredible thing that happens when a group of people or groups of people get together and put all their thought and all their energy into one person. A very lucky man to have so many people who will mourn his loss and to give that energy. And that energy, of course, will be forever imprinted in objects and, his coffin and probably his remains while they're still there, in the people who were there, and they will be able to pick up on that energy. And I think that is what's often left behind, that makes it very easy for souls to reconnect if they wish to come and visit those areas that they used to live in, and we probably call them ghosts. But certainly I felt tremendous energy, and you really get an idea when you see something like that on such a grand scale, how it can create almost a living entity, this energy, and it can get embedded in the nature surrounding it. So that's kind of what I'm about today. I want to see nature's energy in the flesh if I can. So I'm going to get out of my bike in a half an hour or so and see what I can find. But I'm perfectly honest to admit to you, I know nothing about nature and nature spirits. So I thought I would try to see what the traditional understanding is of nature spirits. So I went to the website of the College of Psychic Studies, and I thought I'd just read to you, and I can also post this down below, what nature spirits are and kind of what they've been doing. And they are part, obviously, of our existence as human beings on this planet since the year dot. And they exist in nature, and you can feel them if you wish to feel them, and I suppose they can interact somewhat with you. Last week I was in Suffolk, and I went to a very famous archaeological dig called Sutton Hoo, which is in Suffolk, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's one of the most important archaeological sites, and was made very famous with the new film called The Dig, which you can see on Netflix with Ralph Fiennes and various other people, Lily James. And it's all about the discovery of an Anglo-Saxon ship about 90 feet long, that a great king, and they're not terribly sure, I think his name may have been Redwald, was buried in, or cremated, I'm not terribly sure. And they also then found in there, I think, a chamber within the boat that had huge amounts of beautiful gold and jewelry and most wonderful sort of jewelry designs that they've all gone now. They've all gone to the British Museum, and there's quite a story behind its discovery and eventually what happened to it. But you can still go to visit Sutton Hoo. It's certainly worth seeing. Like everything else, these things cost money now because you have to become a member of the National Trust or you have to pay an entry fee. And it is worth it. You can see, I think, about 7 or 8 burial mounds that the Anglo-Saxons used to use, and they've all been either robbed, over the millennia, because they originate from about, I think, about 400 or 500 A.D. So they're pretty old. And they were robbed pretty much in the Middle Ages and later, obviously, because they stood out, and people went through the centre and dug shafts and managed to find what was in them. What was unique about the particular mound where this boat was found in just at the beginning of the Second World War, the outbreak of the Second World War, about 1939, was that this amateur archaeologist, Basil, had, with the help of the lady who owned the land, Edith, decided to excavate one mound that everyone thought had long since been robbed. But he somehow managed to come to the conclusion that where people had been digging was completely wrong, because the mound, if you think of a mound, if you cut it in half and then reshape it as a mound, the original center is going to be not in the center of the new mound, but it's going to be further to the right, if you like, of where that was. But you wouldn't see it because it would be completely flat, because they turned it into farmland. So that's where he eventually started digging in the flat part. And, people in the local Ipswich Museum thought he was completely crazy. And as is with all these wonderful stories, he did manage to find the treasure, but he didn't actually find a boat. He found the imprints that the boat had made in the sand, because, over the millennia again, the wood had completely rotted in the sandy, acidic soil, leaving just what they call a ghost ship, leaving a sort of almost a fossilized sand, very, very, very delicate. And it had to be very carefully excavated, which he did until, of course, the British Museum got involved, and then they tried to throw him off the dig and take over and take all the glory, and a part of the story, I suppose. But he did finally get recognition when they found this whole thing, and they excavated the whole boat, and they found the treasure. And I understand right now a group of people managed to get funding, and they have managed to draw up very, very detailed blueprints from what was found, and from the knowledge of the 4 or 5 other boats that have been found. They've been able to recreate this boat, and they're nearly finished building it in a port in, I think, near Felixstowe, not far away from where the Sutton Hoo site is. And they're going to recreate this boat and sail it around and see how it worked. So there we are. But when we were there, my daughter and I, we certainly felt, oh my goodness, we feel something there. We felt actually that there's a lot more hidden there, but not where people think it is. We thought it was probably more in the valley rather than the hills on the side, which are the Hoos. I don't know why, but that's what we felt. And we could certainly feel that there was lots going on there. And it's interesting to note the whole psychic connection between Sutton Hoo has been largely whitewashed from history, and it was certainly not in the movie either, and it's not in any of the accounts that I've read. I just found it somewhere on a psychic book that was left in Sutton Hoo, in the house where Edith lived, and Edith Pretty, and there's a little library there, and I found this book, and I opened it up, and it talked about the ghostly side of Sutton Hoo. And it turns out that Edith Pretty was one of the founders of the Spiritualist Association, and probably in the early 20th century, when it was quite strong. She was fascinated by spiritualism, and she gave a lot of money to the local, I think, Ipswich Spiritualist Association, and set up a spiritualist church. And she was interested in digging because she sadly lost her husband to stomach cancer as a very young man at the start of this story, and she was left to bring up her young son. And the husband had actually bought this house with these huge burial mounds, because he was obviously an amateur archaeologist, and he thought that one day he might like to try digging there to see what he could find, but never got the chance. And one day Edith claims that she saw a wonderfully regaled warrior standing near this particular burial mound, was absolutely convinced that he looked like he was a king or something very important. And that's what got her going, a spiritual revelation. And she managed to contact Basil, this local archaeologist, an amateur archaeologist. And that's why she asked him to dig at that particular place, even though everyone had successfully tried or unsuccessfully tried to dig around there before and never found anything and were convinced that it was all robbed, but they were actually digging in the wrong place. But she was convinced that that was the right place, and that gave Basil the idea too, I think, to think out of the box and wonder, well, maybe we're digging in the right place, but in the wrong part of it, because of that whole idea of it having been half knocked down and turned into farmland. So that was a spiritual dimension to Sutton Hoo. And I think I only read that after leaving Sutton Hoo, so I didn't know that at the time. But I certainly felt, things there. I felt that they were spirits. I don't know if warriors, but they were certainly spirits wandering around there. I certainly felt there was a tremendous amount of energy. And I felt that psychic connection. So it's interesting that that exists. Anyway, so what are the nature spirits? Well, I'll read it to you. It says that gnomes are the number one. Believe it or not, they are sort of elemental kinds of spirits, and they are there to protect the earth. Now, elemental spirits, they're 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire, and each of them has a natural spirit, or known as an elemental, that looks after that particular thing. Then you have undines, if I'm saying that right, which are the elements that protect water. You have sylphs, who are the elements that protect the air, and salamanders are the elements associated with fire. I think I've heard of salamanders. I think that was in Harry Potter, wasn't it? They suddenly burn. They just, like, their defense mechanism is to burn. Then you have different types of nymphs. These are supernatural beings that are associated with a particular location or natural element. Some are connected with water and soil, while others are found in mountains, forests, and meadows. Nymphs are often depicted as beautiful women and are believed to possess magical powers and the ability to communicate with us humans. There are many different types of nymphs, each associated with a different aspect of nature. For example, I think, again, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, naiads, which are nymphs of fresh water, such as rivers, lakes, and springs. And then you've got oreads. Oreads are nymphs of mountains and rocky places. Dryads are nymphs of trees, particularly oak trees. Nereids are nymphs of the sea and are often depicted as riding on the backs of dolphins or other sea creatures. Nymphs are often worshipped in ancient Greece as powerful and benevolent spirits that could bring fertility, prosperity, and protection to the land and its inhabitants. Then you've got the power that these things gave, which in mythology and literature, they said that nymphs continue to be a popular theme. They often appeared in romantic or magical figures in poetry, art, and storytelling. Sorry, I'm just literally reading this out, so I'm trying to get an understanding while I'm speaking. First time I've read this. But what is a dryad? Yes, as mentioned, particularly in oak trees. They typically depict beautiful young women who lived in unique trees. They can be shy creatures, often hide from humans or other creatures that threaten their trees. However, they're committed to protecting their trees and often communicate with those who honor and respect it. Of course, these different types of nature spirits are often described differently across different cultures and spiritual traditions. How to connect to nature spirits? Well, you want to apparently practice meditation and visualization. spend time in nature, which I think is what I'm going to do. I find that the best. And it says here, yes, it's one of the best ways to connect with nature spirits and plant spirits is to spend time in nature surrounded by plants and trees. Take a walk in the woods or a park, or sit under a tree and spend time in your garden. To be present and mindful of the natural world around you and observe the plants and trees with curiosity and reverence. Use plant medicine such as herbs, essential oils, flower essences. Working with these medicines can be a powerful way to connect with plant spirits and access their healing properties. Create a plant altar. Setting up a special altar or sacred place in your home and garden can be a powerful way to honor and connect with plant spirits. Study plant folklore and mythology. Learning about folklore and mythology associated with different plants and plant spirits can deepen your understanding and connection. Connecting with nature spirits is very personal and a highly intuitive practice, which works for one person but maybe not for another. So follow your instincts, listen to your intuition as you explore this spiritual path. Well, that sounds like fantastic advice, and that's exactly the sort of advice I would give to anyone, again, who's looking to make any form of spiritual connection. Follow your instincts, trust your feelings, don't feel shy, and don't discount anything that just pops into your head or anything that seems to be a coincidence or anything you see that suddenly arises that makes you pay attention. Often that's the way souls or whoever entities are trying to get your attention. They have to get your attention somehow beyond just the normal brain function, because they don't actually work the way our brains work. You have to tune into their frequencies. And their frequencies are very vast and multitudinous, and most of us can just tune into a couple of them. So there we go. That took me a while. Sorry about that. I hope you found it interesting. When you hear me next, I will be in nature. Now, I have absolutely no idea where I'm going. I had this very strong feeling that I just should get on a train with my bicycle and get far out into the countryside and cycle around to find somewhere completely new. Okay, so here I am. I managed to find a really, really lovely spot. I'll have to look up later exactly where I am in relation to my house. But I'm on a hill, raised above a lake. And yes, it's truly beautiful. I've taken a photograph, which I'll put as the picture for the episode. I was driving around thinking, where do I go? And then this really called to me, because I had to pedal up a steep grass bank in order to get to a bench at the top of this hill. And it's just me, and I'm in a little clearing with forest all around me. Nobody else can get up here except me. And I can look down at the lake and I can see people paddling in their boats. You can hear all the geese and the birds and the ducks, and a fountain that's blowing away in the water. And in the background is a major motorway. And the thoughts that I had when I came towards this place were really threefold. Firstly, how hard it is in this modern world to find somewhere in nature which is quiet and secluded and peaceful. It's almost impossible, and especially if you live in a city like I do in Cologne. I'm sure I could have got on the train and gone further out as was my original intention, but I decided then just to cycle and see where I could get to. It's a lovely park, really. It's not really the countryside, but it's certainly nature. I'm very glad to be here. The second thought I had was, you wonder again how we've shaped this, how we've created this over the existence of human beings. And as I was getting here, I was on a very long stretch of grass. And it looked to me like it must have been once upon a time an airfield. It was running east and west, and it was perfectly straight. It would have been ideal, I would imagine, for a Second World War landing site. And I had these real visions that I was actually on an old, disused, probably Second World War airstrip. Again, I don't know. I have to look that up when I get home, and let's see if that's true. And then the third feeling I got once I got to the very top here was immediately that I'm sitting on this bench, but it's surrounded by all the detritus of human life. And I was overwhelmed with messages and feelings from nature that was just trying to demonstrate to me, as if I needed it demonstrating, how mankind is not so much destroying nature, but is definitely not living in harmony with nature. And it doesn't seem to give a damn what it does to nature most of the time, and will just leave behind all its rubbish and never leaves things the way that they found it. I mean, nature, the way it exists, is so beautiful and perfect. It's a cliche, but it really is. I mean, it is absolutely wonderful if it's left alone. But as soon as we come along, we bring all our stuff with us and we kind of destroy it in a way. We destroy how lovely it was when we got here. And just to give you an example, I mean, I'm surrounded by people who've taken their dogs here and have left dog shit all over the place. A couple of orange dog shit bags are around which are full, which haven't been taken with them or not even used. Full of cigarette ends. Everyone was here obviously thinking, what a wonderful view, let's have a cigarette, and then they just drop their ends on the floor. I mean, it's full of those. Old tops from Kolsch beer bottles. There's old tins of Gaffel Kolsch lager, newspapers, bits of newspaper, wrappers from sweets. And right behind me, somebody's obviously even set up a fire, and there's just the resemblance of all the charred wood. And they didn't even bother to try to dig a hole or even particularly to make it fire safe. They just plonked it on top there and probably had a raging fire up here and God knows what else they were doing. So, and left it there afterwards. They just left it there for somebody else to clean up. It's really sad, and I'm getting that feeling, and this is not from any form of environmental concern in me. I just felt that I something that I haven't felt before. How awful we are. Just why don't we just clean up and make it nice for the next people to enjoy nature, but also for the I suppose it must be the spirits of nature who are guardians of everything that is water, air, fire, and air, and are so part of this environment and are part of the trees, are part of it all. And it's just how rude. It's just so rude. It's like going into somebody's house and defecating on the floor and just leaving it there and going. I mean, that's a feeling I'm having. So there we are. Those are the feelings. But more to the beauty of nature. I mean, it is still a beautiful spot, and I can see green butterflies fluttering over and loads of daisies, and spring is really underway now. Here we are just nearly approaching May, and the trees are about 70% open now with their leaves, a lot not. Lots of lovely colours, blue sky with lovely slowly drifting white clouds, loads of people out on their bicycles, and it's really beautiful. And I'm just wondering why I found myself here, and if I can do as the article suggested, to try to meditate, which is what I do anyway, and get into a receptive state, maybe I can actually feel some of these nature spirits. I just was drawn to maybe 4 contrails in the sky of jets, obviously passing east and west. So by the looks of it, the sun is right ahead of me, so that must be roughly south. So they must be heading from east to west. So they must be, I presume, flying over Germany and heading towards America, I presume, and England, and eventually to America. So I got that feeling suddenly of air and the spirits of air. And what it was saying to me was actually kind of a rather sad message in a way. It was also about pilots and people who die in the air, that there is something very important about these nature spirits, because if you are dealing with a death that occurs in the air, or things that happen if you go into the sky, for that matter, even if you go into space, your last experience on this planet involves mainly being in the air. And for that reason, there is a tremendous amount of energy, I'm being told, that's been created by spirits in the air. It's the energy that we've imparted to the air. I'm wanting to say that this is, in a way, quite similar to what I saw in England the other day when I was seeing these Anglo-Saxon burial mounds, and how important it was to them and our ancestors to either be buried or to be cremated, and all the very complicated rituals that went with burial. And I also felt that suddenly, that if you like, the spirits of the earth are obviously heavily involved if you are laid to rest in the earth. And there is a tremendous amount of energy associated, and that they get from that, the human spirit and animal spirits that are finally laid laid down into the earth. I felt that as well. But then I felt the fire again. I suppose it's the elemental spirits of fire, and how, again, it's quite interesting how various religions still insist on cremation, while others, like the Catholics, do not like cremation, I believe. Why? Why would certain religions not want cremation? Why would some people be frightened of fire? What does fire represent to some religions and some people that they feel is not right, and a body should be placed in the earth? Not terribly sure about that. I'm sure it's something to do with, religion rather than any practical spiritual thing. I'd love to know what people would think of that. But obviously the Anglo-Saxons had different periods of time and would cremate or would bury. And I think the ancient Romans probably the same. I think some were laid into the ground, some were burned, and all the way through the history of England anyway, and I imagine it's pretty much the same in the history of all of the world, is that throughout the periods of time, different methods of disposal of the body became fashionable and then unfashionable. So I obviously feel the elemental spirits most definitely seem to get a lot of their energy from the passing of a human body into its spiritual component, and either being burned in that process or being buried in that process, or happening obviously in the air. But in terms of the water, I'm also suddenly feeling those. I had this image of sailors who had died at sea, being put into cloths and being ceremoniously put over the side of the ship into the depths of the ocean, and how that still happens, I believe. If people die at sea, they are still put into the water. And again, interesting, the fourth and final method of body disposal, also very elemental and having an effect on the power of water and the water spirits. So those thoughts came to me. I don't know what type of nature spirit is communicating with me right now, but it wants to draw my attention to how they are very important in, if you like, the interface between us as humans and as animals, with all the different elemental sides of existence. As we, for instance, just walk along a path, we are physically walking along the earth. We're breathing in the air, and we're using our energy, which, if you like, you could say is almost burning energy. I've heard that expression before. And we are made up of water, 80% or something of water, and we need water. It's very important to us. So all of that is inside us. was the thought that came, and how all of life seems to be pretty much the same. So the elemental spirits are part of us, not just standalone representatives of particular things. They are part of us, within us, and they gain the power from us, and we give them power as well. That's an interesting thought. A message is coming to me about the importance of animals, and how animals can sense all these nature spirits, in fact far more than us, and the indication is, of course, that they assist the animal kingdom in a way because they can, and because animals can recognize their influence. And I'm being told that this affects the way that animals live, the way they fly, the directions they go, the food that they eat, the way they guard their safety. A lot of their feelings are influenced by what is happening in nature. The food apparently is, the food that we eat and the food that animals eat in nature is something that is also, if you like, I'm hearing sort of like supervised by nature spirits, and the ability for us to be able to live in harmony with nature has come about because we've been able to eat certain types of food, and certain types of food is poisonous for us. But it's the nature spirits that have always guided animals and humans as to what is safe and what is poisonous. That's an interesting thought. The thought also then came up about medicine, and I did read that in that article just now. But yes, it's a very strong feeling, and it's a feeling that I've felt in the last few weeks when I've been out in nature a lot, is how we as a species, through the thousands of years that we've been around, have only really had medicine that is, I suppose, petroleum-based and based around what we would call progressive science. But before that, in the last 200 years before that, I suppose, and maybe in the 100 years ago before that, most medicine came from nature. And yes, I'm sure there was a lot of illnesses that we now can cure, and we say that could not have happened had it not been for modern medicine. However, for thousands and thousands of years, whether it's in China or everywhere else, they have a different form of medicine, and they have had different ways of treating people. And again, I really don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, I've obviously been brought up to think that, where would we be without penicillin and all of that stuff. But I'm pretty much aware that a lot of plants produce it. I know that penicillin comes pretty much from the mold that grows on the outside of certain things when they're left standing for a long time. And yeasts and all sorts of things are in nature and have been in nature for forever, and have been used everything from like ancient civilizations, like I was speaking about before, who live in the Amazon, to Anglo-Saxons, Romans, whoever, who were using nature and knew which plants had medicinal properties. And I'm being told that this guidance, this medicine, this guidance came from and is also looked after, cultivated, and is promulgated by nature spirits. It's in their domain to look after disease and help people overcome disease. And if only we would look a little bit more, I'm feeling, into what the nature spirits can offer through natural remedies, and we should try to start trusting that a little bit more, rather than the way I was brought up, which is always to think, that's just such a lot of rubbish and we really should be popping a few pills. And that's coming through to me very strongly. Well, I presume I'm now receiving messages from the spirits of the trees. And I'm surrounded by beautiful tall poplar trees. I'm not a great tree expert, but I think they are all sorts of elms and beech and maple trees I can recognize from the maple syrup adverts. I can see lots of blackberry bushes all around me. Maybe they're blackberry bushes. They look like it. They haven't got blackberries yet, obviously. So I'm surrounded by a whole varieties of trees that all live together in perfect harmony, but also somehow competing, I suppose, for sunlight. But I'm getting that message that one mustn't forget that just because we consider ourselves to be highly intelligent and the way that we are as humans dominating the planet seems to be the only form of intelligent life, the message I'm getting is that that's just so untrue. It's just that we don't understand the different type of life that's involved in being a plant, or for that matter, other animals. And it's as different, I'm being told now, as we are being seen perhaps by interdimensional beings or beings from other star systems. You know, they will look at us probably and think we are as a different form of life as a duck or a goose. We really probably are not that much more evolved in their senses than that. And so we shouldn't be so arrogant as to look down at animals and look down at plants. It's coming to me about something also I read recently. I think it referred to dolphins, but also it might refer to other sea animals. That science is beginning to decode language in such a way that we can understand. So without any doubt, there are what we might call advanced animals already out there using language and using communication. But perhaps we've always been looking in the wrong way because we're looking for vocal language. We're looking for what we use rather than the psychic type of communication, which is wordless and therefore can communicate with us instantly through the emotions and the feelings. And that's kind of what I'm feeling here with the trees. I'm feeling that they're communicating with me in a psychic way, much more obviously than any other way, because how could they? I mean, I wouldn't be able to speak to them, although you'd love to. I understand from an old gardener friend of mine years ago that he used to speak to his tomatoes and they would help grow. Well, I suppose it's the energy that you're putting in, isn't it? It's the fact that you are bothering to recognize another form of life, to talk to it and to give it value, to give it credence, that you then open up that channel to be able to communicate. It's harmony and it's empathy with nature around you. Two more thoughts really came to me. Water. As I'm listening to that fountain in the middle of the lake and the noise that it makes, I suddenly had that vision of how when my children were very young, when they were babies, we used to soothe them with the sound of water, usually a recording of ocean waves. It was sometimes the only thing that would calm them enough to put them to sleep. And even to this day, both of my twin girls, they put on the sounds of oceans one puts it on an iPad and the other has a machine, and they love to hear the sound of the ocean and the waves, and it reassures them and it soothes them. Again, I mean, the power of the water spirits and the sound that is created through water to soothe and to help the young to sleep and to help us relax. And the second thought was the wind blowing through the trees. And it was as if the trees were again trying to show me how dependent they are on the wind. And it's how all of us are, as living beings, dependent on all of the four elemental sides of spiritual life. A tree could not live without wind for many reasons, for the photosynthesis and for the movement of water. I think it's called transpiration from the roots through to the leaves. They need to blow their leaves around, and all the various bits of pollen that's going to be enable a seed to travel a long distance so it can grow somewhere else. The whole pollination thing is so important to trees with wind and with other plants. And wind and water is therefore so vital, but so is the sun. If you like, the sun is the fire, and without the sun, plants would quickly die. They would never grow. They get all their energy. We get our energy from the sun too. It helps us as humans, even through our skin. It helps keep us warm. It provides vitamin D. It helps our psychology. People who live in very low sunlight latitudes, latitudes, often have to have sun lamps in the winter. Otherwise, they get depressed. And you hear the people who live in the northern latitudes can be very depressed. We need sun. Sun is something that feeds us. It gives us energy. It makes us better. It heals us. That's why it was such an important thing to ancient civilization, not only because it would enable farming to take place, but it would also be something they would be worshipping because of it, the power of the elemental power of the sun gods and the spirits of that. And it's in every religion, the power of the sun. But that's the heat, that's the fire. So we have the water, we have the air, and we have the fire. But then we have the elemental gods of the earth. And the earth is a very complicated microsystem, a microcosm of soils and minerals and animals and bacteria, as well as being a solid system that enables roots to be able to anchor themselves, but also enables us to walk on things. We couldn't walk if there was no soil or rock. What would it be? It would be really difficult. So, it sounds a bit crazy, but we need that soil too to grow. We need that soil for our survival. We need the earth as much as the plants need the earth, the animals need the earth. What we're sitting on is a rocky planet. So as a kind of last closing thought, that it came to me how, we can't question for a second the existence of nature spirits, because they are integrated in everything that we just take for granted in our life. And they are very much part of us as well. We are part of nature. Nature is part of us. And when we're alive, we can commune and receive many benefits from nature if we wish, if we try. But we also need to show respect for it as much as we wish to use it. And the last feeling that's coming through is this idea of us, abusing nature by drilling and taking all the oil and polluting and destroying our forests and all of that. It does show you just how crazy it is, how out of balance our life has become, and how we are destroying the very thing that is necessary for our happiness and our existence. Again, I don't want to preach some environmentalist, I'm not Greta Thunberg here, but I'm having that very strong feeling that sitting here, it's a kind of, the nature is yelling out at me and asking me to stop it in a way, to try to see a world that can exist without having to exploit nature and ruin nature. It could be possible. I'm not sure I can do it on my own. I think we are making some steps. But hearing what's going on at the moment with Donald Trump talking about deep sea mining again and perhaps destroying, irreplaceable ecosystems at the bottom of the oceans just because industry requires certain pebbles that have certain very rare earth metals. I mean, it's terribly short-sighted. because in 100 years' time we won't even be using these rare earth metals anymore, because technology will have moved on and we'll be looking for something completely different. But that does seem to be the nature of our human existence here. For whatever reason, we come here and we use up this planet like any other resource, like anything. We just use it up and then spit it out, and we're not thinking much anymore about what we're leaving behind. And there we are. That's that thought I had when I came here. When you go into nature, respect it, and don't leave shit behind, and make it wonderful for the next person, not worse. So there we are. I'll leave you now with the wonderful sounds of nature, although you can hear the motorway behind me as well. But I'll just leave it on for a while. Thank you. If any of you have bothered listening this long, you get a little bonus, because I had another thought that just came through of the importance of air and how the air spirits are managing everything. I mean, we wouldn't be able to hear any of this if it wasn't for air. Sound is so important, and sound travels through air. It doesn't travel through a vacuum. So sound is something that is very uniquely human. We wouldn't be able to get it unless we were on a planet that had a medium through which sound could travel. But how we take sound for granted, and how we've added sound, and sound becomes a symphony of different sounds, and that's what I'm hearing here. Thank you.